non-duality is kind of interesting, because I suppose it's one of those things that creates a break, a change in a life. It's the inauguration of something entirely new, something that couldn't have been preempted, couldn't have been known, couldn't have been understood. So it tends to leave you, after seeing this, with a kind of benign fascination. It's quite hard to move on from this, because where do you move on to? So there's the seeking, which is a pain in the ass, and then if you're lucky there's maybe even a glimpse of this, which seems to be quite common now. So a glimpse of this being a glimpse of oneness. And there are other things that can change us too, like trauma. Maybe something traumatic happens and your life's never the same. But there's not much that opens us up in the way that, there's nothing really that opens us up in the way that the seeing of the non-dual does. And life is different after that, although it becomes normal. It's just basically, I sort of think of it as an upgrade. It's easier in certain ways. And in some ways it can be more difficult as well. For some people it may not benefit them at all. In fact, it might make things more difficult. Because it changes our thinking in some subtle ways as well, and in a way it makes it can be more difficult. I don't know, if you're studying something or you're doing a training, even in psychotherapy or something, it might be more difficult in certain ways, because if you're not living from the story in the same way, it can be quite difficult sometimes to actually access that. To emote on demand, or so it can go other ways, different ways. And so basically the seeing of this is the end of separation between what I what we sort of took to be myself and the world, the universe. There's just this boundless love, boundless intimacy, boundless joy. The experience of being kind of weightless, being nothing here, nothing happening, nothing ever having happened or will happen, as well as life continuing. And it can be really intense initially, and so it's experienced as a surrender, but no one doing that, so life is surrendered. There's just life, and a lot of struggle, a lot of striving, a lot of ambition, all the kind of stuff that we're usually concerned with tends to fall away, particularly in the honeymoon period, where it's just sinking into this, being where you are. So there's no replacement for that. There's no kind of, this is what I am, or it's the end of all that in a sense. It's unknowing. And the beauty of it is seeing beauty in everything, seeing the stillness that permeates life and the sacred in that. There can be an isolation in this too, as in when you speak about it, or it can create a gulf in some ways because some of your experience may not correspond to experience of other people in subtle ways or less subtle ways. Because a lot of what we do is involved in, striving, becoming, which goes on as well. But so it's paradoxical. It's, you can't speak of the person, and yet there is this person that exists, and life goes on, and the character is quite similar. Maybe some defenses have dropped away, the heart may be more open, there may be more vulnerability than there was before, depending on the defenses, because that's what the mind is in a way. And but the ego doesn't die. I mean, there's always an identity. The character has an identity, and that continues. And we forget some, we're born into this, and for very few people, there never was an ego in the sense of that division didn't appear, but for most of us, we began to recognize ourselves in the mirror and in all the kind of demands of life were met through an ego. Mine, this what's mine, and skin as a kind of boundary line. And yet it is, I mean, boundaries exist, psychological boundaries still exist, and you may not have any of those, like whether you wake up or not. So it doesn't necessarily give you the tools for living. It doesn't necessarily equip you for life in the best possible way. If you've certain trauma, maybe your motivation was lacking, it doesn't necessarily give you motivation, depending on, your history that was there. So maybe you were punished as a kid for being angry, so you learned not to be angry, therefore, so there's nothing to give you protection. You don't know how to protect yourself, and you may not know what fairness looks like, because usually anger tells us when someone's trespassed our boundaries, but if you don't have that, you may invite all sorts of, bad behaviours. And so, but it's a gift. This is a gift, and it's great. So it can't be summoned. It can't be, you can't make this happen, because there's no one in the first place. So there's and there may be a lot of energetic phenomena around this. There may be all sorts of different experiences you can have around this, and it can be quite confusing initially, and you might recognize stuff, like you probably know that if emptiness and fullness have been seen, so emptiness is seeing that there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing, no objects. And the fullness is love, the seeing of everything, so there's no division, there's just the intimacy. But so everything that was sought in its various guises, ambition or whatever, is recognized or fulfilled in the moment of seeing this, which isn't to say that you won't want to find fulfilling work, fulfilling relationships, and again, it's paradoxical. So, but very often there's a period of time, maybe 6 months or a couple of years, where you just want to hang out and experience life from this perspective, which is just the love and the seeing, particularly in nature or wherever it is that you feel that most deeply, or everywhere initially, but and then some people struggle to identify it because the mind doubts. It's part of what the mind does. It's always, some people don't experience that. But the mind can be totally obliterated in this. If it's there, it may come back, but it's unlikely to be so annoying. It's like slowed down and less annoying. And there may be just periods of no mind or mind, and if anyone's got any questions.
To what extent does it relate to the idea that, you know, you think of yourself as having a life, but actually it's not your life, you're actually part of a life, if that makes sense, so you're not kind of like got a separate life or somebody else hasn't got a, it's all part of one life. I don't know if that relates to this concept or not.
Well, it's not maybe how you perceive it, in the sense that life is still intensely personal, because there's a character here, but it's the identity has fallen away from that, so it's not the same, and it's very hard to describe that. You can say there's no one here, but even that doesn't cut it. It's because if it really was the case, if it was absolutely as described, then you think you wouldn't give a shit what happens. But actually you do. The character obviously still moves away from pain and towards pleasure. There's probably less fear-based movement. There's more flow. There's more kind of an organic unfolding, I suppose, but not always. Everybody's got their kind of edges where something's uncomfortable for them, so they may come up against a situation that is just awful and that can't be negotiated with, in a sense. So yeah, life goes on. So it's not like totally impersonal in that sense. In an absolute sense it is, but the actual lived experience isn't. I mean, it still matters what happens, what you do, and particularly further down the line where you maybe want to bring life into alignment with this more, so that, I don't know, maybe you're more interested in just making money or something, so because you're more rooted in the present, there's more kind of fulfillment in what you actually love, so you're kind of more, it makes more sense to kind of operate from where the heart is, because rather than just the goal. So you're probably less goal orientated, less likely to put things off until maybe retirement, or it's like life is happening now, and So yeah, but anything that's said about this isn't it either. Like, it really isn't.
Is the lived experience even real? Like, the character is built from situations, I suppose, like from when you're growing up. And like obviously you said, like traumas and things can cause fear and that creates a character, but what if it's, because obviously that's in the past, we can't really relive it, we only relive it through fear. So like, is that real? I don't know if I can't.
What do you mean, is the past real?
Yeah, like, is there even any saying that that trauma was real and that's why the character was built?
Well, who knows ultimately? I mean, the trauma lives and it's in this moment. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Because the mind can be empty, but the body holds all that and the truth of all that. And if you don't unpack the trauma, the body might revolt as well. So, I mean, all we know is this moment, so to speak of that and, in another reality, maybe it is all real. Who knows what this is? And but we live in time in a sense that we usually, by the end of a meeting, I have a fair idea that 2 hours. But sometimes even that can collapse, and there's not. And I think everybody gets a sense of that, don't they? That timeless, if they're really opened up and there's just something, I don't know, they're somewhere beautiful, maybe they're having a glass of wine and absorbed in the moment. But yeah, all the absolutes, it's, I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know, I've been trying to write about it a lot, like how it's, I feel like you can't prove anything, but like you say, the body holds trauma, but like memories, because we change memories, right?
Yeah.
So we change them to suit us as well, I find. Like when someone tells you something that's happened, they've normally edited it a little bit, whereas if it was filmed, it wouldn't have been quite like that.
Yeah.
So I just wonder if things are, if when the character's built, if there's something built in there also that, I don't really know what I'm getting at. It just, everything feels very, I think since I kind of woken up or felt like I've woken up, my character's dropped away a lot.
Uh-huh.
And I'm trying to figure out where we get our character and where, if that was even a thing. Do you know what I mean? Like we change so much constantly. Like, if we're all kind of the same thing, are we just picking things up off each other? And I don't really know what I'm getting at. It makes sense in my head.
So you see the characters like just like a
learned behaviour almost.
Learned behaviour and like a flow then, like just nothing tangible, nothing that's really you, like that could be pinned down. And I know, like, because a lot of people say that, but then there is a real sense of, when you're with somebody and you get to know them, like the real sense of what that character's about and their unique stamp. I mean, that's, and also all the after death stuff with the way memory kind of works there and becomes very, like, it's interesting as well, isn't it? But to, like, I just find it interesting that you can't sidestep that. And if you don't really, that whole thing, if you're not in touch with the whole emotional range, then you don't know, even if you've woken up, you don't know what the hell's going on. You know. I find it interesting because we equate this with wisdom, and yes, it's the wisdom of knowing that I'm not this, or not only this, or all of it and none of it, and yet it just doesn't help us navigate life. I find that fascinating, and it doesn't necessarily make us better people if we don't recognize that, and you know, because there's so much baggage with this, isn't there? Like, of, it makes you more compassionate, it makes you, you know, the projection onto the ideal, we'll project that onto anyone, who sits at the front of a room, or even just sounds authoritative. Actually, we just project onto that. And some people, even after seeing through this, I think, do that as well. Like, there's something about, we fall for that because we haven't seen through our own initial projections onto mummy and daddy, and like, we're still protecting them, so we still see them as these massive giants, and who may have actually just been shits and not really give a fuck about you, like, but preserving that image at all costs, at the cost of wisdom, the cost of development, and so, I don't know.
There's a lot of peace here since the seeing the No South, but massive confusion at the same time, and just the weirdness of the kundalini. Like, it's just been so, since I last saw you even, it's just been like, there's a couple of times I was like, I might have to change myself into a loony bin, but they never lasted, those periods, but it's taken on a very like yogic kind of form here, and with a lot of like spontaneous yoga on the floor, like crazy back bends and like even like bridges and things like that.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I've been lying on the floor, and my body will just do sort of like, alarm will go up and it'll put me into a yoga thing, and then we'll work on certain areas of my body that have got problems, and all sorts of mad shit, and like prayer, like sort of like going into a prayer position and going like that, and then going up to my head, and then I've been etching this mark onto my head, and I wondered if you knew what that was. Obviously it looks like a kind of, I mean, third eye, it's somehow related to my third eye chakra, I think.
Right.
But so I've just been like furiously rubbing, and then it will just stop, and then I'll lie down, and then after like a really long session, it will do something really sweet, like it will just kind of caress my face like that, or it'll kind of go like, ah, like that.
Right.
But I don't know what it is, or who it is, or what's going on. And I had this one where I can't remember how long I was on the floor writhing around. I just lost sense of time, and at some point it felt like something came into me, like, and I had this cheeky grin on my face, and I even looked in the mirror and said, "I'm back, baby." And then later on I was like, wait, who's back? What is going on? And then I had all this Egyptian symbolism, and just Egyptian signs, and I started watching YouTube Egyptian stuff and talking to Rakesh about it, because he has this massive interest in ancient Egypt as well.
Right.
And together we've been like, what is going on, man? Because he's had like, so he doesn't have anything like this, but similar connections to Egypt or something. And then I thought, I started looking into the Book of the Dead, and because those guys were buried with papa rolls and things like that, and to navigate them through the afterlife, and they were into DMT in the third eye.
Oh, right, okay, Tibetan Book of the Dead.
Yeah, right. And I was like, am I like an Egyptian guy? And then I thought, and then for a while I thought, do you know Aleister Crowley?
Yeah.
I thought I was that guy, because he died on the 1st of December, which is when I was born, and we're into so much similar shit, like writing poetry, like mountaineering, or like walked over through the Pyrenees. And when I read about this guy, I'm just like, there's just similarity. So for a while I thought it was that guy, and recently I haven't thought it for a while. I got tonsillitis recently. I'm just recovering from it, and I've sort of not thought about all of it for a while. Right. But then today, as soon as I was back from being ill, I was like, as soon as I lie on the floor, it's like, so I don't know. I can't find anyone who knows anything about it online. it's total freak show. So I'm sort of used to it now. It was odd at the beginning, but I don't know what. It obviously seems to be going along the meridian lines. I don't know what the purpose of it is.
Oh, interesting. Have you tried to contact anyone around it?
Because I don't know anyone who would know anything about it. I don't know anyone. Everyone I've spoken to has just looked at me really confused, even people that I thought might know something about it.
Yeah, because it's quite, I mean, that sounds quite an extraordinary one, because I was thinking of, I mean, I don't know beyond like Bonnie Greenwell and,
No, right.
you know,
Okay.
I don't know.
Because I've heard about the yoga. I've heard of people doing yoga and suddenly going to downward dog, like that.
Yeah.
So I know it's a thing, but I've not heard of anyone etching a mark onto them. So I'm
Yeah.
just trying to figure out what it is.
Oh.
If it's possible, maybe I'll never know. I don't know.
Because I know, I mean, I was moved into to different, but it was more subtle than that, but
Right,
different
right.
poses.
Okay.
But yeah, but yours sound more, particularly the last time you were here and you're talking about the throat chakra stuff.
That's
I
right.
mean,
That's right.
that was amazing.
Yeah,
That's
and now the
cool.
hands have opened up. They've been going like, and are really fast, like hand chakras.
Are you writing this stuff down?
No, but I probably should.
You probably should, yeah, because it's really an interesting one. Like it's full on
it's
as well.
pretty unique, I think. Yeah.
I would, and the days and everything, because it's
Yeah, I
it might be
should,
useful,
yeah.
and you might want to use it at some point too.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, I just want to try, and I'm trying to just find someone who could tell me, oh, I know a guy that happened to, and this is what it means, but I can't find anything about it.
I've never heard of one so clear like that. You know, I mean, because the different processes, like, you know, that whole Gopi Krishna was very much light, you know, like, and it's quite common, you know, seeing the inside of the body and
Okay.
everything kind of luminescent and all that, you know, they seem to be very individual as well,
Yeah.
don't they? And
Yeah.
some people it's much more kind of cliched chakra
Yeah.
stuff about.
I have little visions as well, like my third eye will kind of scrunch, I'm like face will tighten up, like that, and it's like trying to show me something,
Right.
but it's not quite evolved enough yet, so I see like a black and white Alice in Wonderland checkered board that kind of comes together, and it tries to show, but I think it's not quite there yet, but it's like working on it. Like one time my hand was doing one of these mudras, like, and it turned to face me like a snake, and it was like, I was like, oh my god, it's going to poke my eye out. And it was like, but it just went, and just really hard on my third eye. So I just have to sit there and take all this mad stuff, you know, and it's very kind energy. It's never once hurt me. I mean, this has burned a little bit, so I'm not afraid of it, but some of the stuff that, I don't know if I need to film it or what, but it's just outlandish. It's so outlandish. It's crazy.
Maybe you should. And it's interesting that you're not phased.
No, I think I'm just a very chilled out. I've always been very go with the flow, you know. So that's with Kundalini, it's the same. Although I mean, I have been phased. There were moments where I was like, "This is getting a bit much now." But I'm just more curious. There's more curiosity, and it's just kind of funny, like, because no one would believe it. So it's nice coming to here to be able to talk about it, because who am I going to talk to about it, you know? And I've got to go home for Christmas with a mark on my head now, and I'm trying to explain what the fuck is going on.
I was trying not to look at it earlier.
Yeah, I like keep a hat on the whole time, you know? I mean, I can stop it mid-process and walk away, but I'm kind of giving it leeway to just do what it wants to do.
Okay, yeah. What about psychological changes? Like, are you noticing anything?
Pretty much the same. You know, when I talk to people on the phone, they wouldn't have a clue that anything's different.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when's it happens when you relax? I think you said that before.
Yeah,
isn't it?
it's sort of become like, I get Kriya all the time, but the intense stuff happens. I've got a yoga mat and I lie on the floor, and then me and whatever this is, we both know it's time. So whatever it wants to do, it can do it then, and it usually starts with my shoulders going or something like that, or then going up and round into very, very, you know, regular yoga positions and stuff. Once I would think it tries to shut me up because my mind was going mental about stuff that I was going to do, and then it just kind of went, or just silence me like that, or just silence me like that. And then one time it was just like really intense, and it was like it was opening up to show me something, and I think I backed out. I got too afraid. I was like, I don't know if it was. I just saw like this big sun or something, and it was opening. I was like, that's too much. I can't, and I got afraid, and then it stopped. But
Right,
I don't know what it is. It's trying to show me, or trying to get me to do. I have no idea.
It's funny because so many. I remember Stan Groff talking about that. You don't resist it, but actually, it didn't cost you anything resisting it.
No, it's easy. I can walk away any time. It's not a problem. But I'm intrigued, so I don't necessarily want. And it's quite a benevolent thing, I think, unless it's very tricky and it's just making me think that it's benevolent. I don't know. I don't know.
And it doesn't necessarily go with, I don't know, because you I think you said before you've had quite a traumatic past as well, haven't you?
Oh yeah. I was a teenager. I was suicidal and had very dark teenage years, you could say. But then I feel like my life since then has kind of been a bit like changing skins, interesting, the kundalini kind of snake symbolism, but I kind of think I've been sort of being different characters and becoming more joyful as my life has gone on.
Because I find that interesting also because it's like, if there's trauma in the body, in the literature for kundalini, it's like, well, it's going to be problematic, but I don't think that's the case, and mine wasn't. And so I just wonder, like, a lot of the stuff that's been written, I mean, I don't know, I mean, some of it's been studied. I know Bonnie Greenwell, she did her PhD in that, and I don't know, like, I think she had a couple of, like, 2,000 people she interviewed or something.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So she'd have some idea, but I don't know.
Yeah. It's bizarre.
It sounds like an adventure, though.
It's if nothing else, it's an adventure. But I will start writing about it because I think that's a good idea.
Have you found it contagious at all?
I've been on my own most. Do you mean with other people?
Yeah, just wondering. Okay.
But this was way before the maddest stuff happened. I think I went for a night out and I was dancing, and there was a point in the night where everyone just started stamping their feet on the floor, all together, and the DJ was like, "What's going on?" And he kept looking at me, and a friend came up to me that night, and I think I talked about this last time. He was like, "Hamish, what are you on?" And I was like, "Nothing." I was a little bit high. Yeah, I'm on Shakti, mate. So if I go out, like, people notice, and even on the tube, people look at me a bit odd, even with my hat on, so people could tell that something's up with me as a person in general. I don't know. I don't feel like I'm giving off a particular vibe, but something's going on. I just don't know where the breaks are. I don't know where it's leading.
Okay.
Who knows?
Oh, that's really interesting.
It's a weird one, isn't it?
I think it can be sometimes contagious. It does seem to have that.
Yeah, I think it probably is.
But obviously it's not for everybody, otherwise
No.
everybody be tripping out on it, wouldn't they? And
Yeah.
they're not. But
Yeah.
that's really exciting.
It's quite, yeah.
It's interesting as well after, because you have had the awakening, haven't you? And
yeah, the seeing of the self as being unreal has been very clearly seen, and as never having been there. But I've not had the sort of this is everything and nothing kind of. There's a lot of speakers that I still I don't resonate with, and not I don't resonate with, but just some things they talk about still haven't clicked.
Yeah.
Maybe won't. I don't know. I'm not too fussed about it, but
cool.
Yeah, I'd like to understand more.
Yeah, because I think from what you said, it's like relaxation. I mean, that's...
Yeah, there's lots of just chilling out, lots of just looking at the trees and stuff like that, and that never used to happen, yeah.
How far do you actually have to study this and become acquainted with the whole non-duality before you can actually reach that change? I mean, can it happen sort of very early on, or do you really need, I'm still quite unfamiliar with the whole sort of process, but is it something you need to really delve into deeply in order to make that change, or can it just simply happen spontaneously?
Yeah, it happens spontaneously. So if you don't know anything about it, it'll happen, but maybe you won't know what's happened, but you'll know that something good has happened. There are probably one or two exceptions to that, like Suzanne Segal, who had an experience of this, who wrote Collision with the Infinite, book about that. She was sort of left in fear for a long time, but yeah, you'll kind of know, and you'll probably recognize something, even if it's like a biblical reference or something. At the very least, it's something, you know, the peace that passes understanding, or heaven on earth, like different phrases might just strike you as, oh, that sounds familiar or whatever. But yeah, you don't need to know anything, because it's beyond the mind anyway. So in a way you can get lost down a labyrinth of trying to understand this, because it's outside, beyond the mind, and there's nothing you can grasp in anything that's written, although you might at best realize that there's something you're not realizing, which is difficult enough to like, yeah, some people it just kind of resonates, I don't know, somehow energetically, the sort of message of it. But yeah, I mean, reading about it, it seems endlessly fascinating when you're seeking this, and then it just seems endlessly boring. Like, it's just like, how can you endlessly repeat? Because it's not really saying anything. I mean, it's just life in a way without that sense of ownership and constriction, and I just kind of, I don't know, it's even becomes difficult to remember how it was, but it definitely used to feel like there's someone in here, and you know, and life's out there. And I remember sort of like, yeah, so like energetically that shifts. So in a way, like it's no one behind the eyes, or but it's interesting. It is interesting to read about it when you haven't, and explore that, because so much it's a big part of so much that's ever written, isn't it? And this sort of, you know, ultimate goal, which everyone seems to be. I don't know what they're going to do when everybody reaches. Just get into football and
stop giving talks.
We'll
all have to stop giving talks for a start.
Or become really shallow.
Because it's easy to become over intellectualise the process by reading so much about it that you can get kind of too lost in that sort of, and it has to be a real lived experience to it to be real, rather than sort of learning it from a book maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, although like, I mean it's interesting as well, I suppose, after it's happened, you probably would be interested in other people's accounts of it, because you know, and I think people have gotten a lot out of reading different sages kind of writing. You know, it's good to have the recognition through someone else, so you kind of, it's easier to own that and go, all right, so this is what's happened, and yes, so I recognise that. Like anything in your experience, if you're depressed and you're reading about someone who's depressed, it's like, all right, God, yeah, I get that, you know. Don't want to get out of bed for more than 3 hours a day. Yeah, one or whatever the hell. So I think there is that, and you know, just exploring it, because it can really, because it really blows your mind, I think, initially, because, well, it doesn't, in a way, in a subtle way, actually, it doesn't at all. It's just, life suddenly switched, and in a way there isn't, it should be more like, what the fuck, you know, what did that happen? But in a way it's just more, you know, just being, like, as if all that is just sort of blown away in a way. So it doesn't make sense in terms of normal psychology, actually, in that sense.
what I have found useful is like the idea of staying in the present. I mean, that helps enormously sort of clear out stress and worries, you know, trying to sort of stay focused in the present, not worrying about the future or what's happened in the past, and also kind of rolling with life. I don't know if that sort of, you know, is to do with it, but that's what I've found quite useful, just trying to be rooted in the present.
Oh, kind of the mindfulness sort of
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
and being more self-aware.
Yeah, just staying in the present, not continue, you know, worrying thoughts about what's going to happen next and, you know, things that may or may not happen in the future, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that can be really good for anxiety if you're getting a lot of ruminative thought and it's just cycling for no reason. But I mean, it can be good for a while. As long as some people get stuck maybe too long in that, where they're not actually maybe talking about what is going on as well. Like, it's good to dip into the story too, and kind of look at what it is you're afraid of and explore that. I think, you know, because you know, you can get really caught up in being mindful about everything, which. But yeah, if you've got ruminative thought, yeah, sure, anything that eases anxiety and that will, and it gives you a really good focus, doesn't it? Just to keep coming back to what's here. It's it's different from the non-dual in the sense because it's not, you know, it's a kind of natural mindfulness that kind of, there's more self-awareness as well, like what's going on internally, and which, yes, it's kind of more effortless. It's an increase in self-awareness, I suppose. But yeah, it's more contrived, I suppose, when you're trying to do that and take the energy out of, you know, fear and, you know. Yeah, it's helpful in that, and it's kind of helpful to know, you know, to know that there is an option as well. Like, it's not who you are, that story. In one sense it is, it's who the character is, you know, and but not in an absolute sense. It's not. It's, you know, can't be contained in anything. Isn't anything to be contained by anything either. So. And that, I think, because the fear of death tends to go in this, so that takes the sting out of the anxiety, you know, that living from the future, which isn't to say, like, thinking about the future. I mean, conflict can still exist, and, you know, even if no one's choosing, ultimately that can be a real pain. It can be really difficult, and so doesn't solve everything. Some people talk about a deepening of this I don't really know what the hell they're referring to. It doesn't really make sense to me. I think that makes sense is things coming more to light or in a psychological way. Some people talk about sort of no mind being deeper than mind after as well. But I find it interesting because you can still be acting out left, right and centre when your mind's not there. It doesn't mean to say you know. Well, you don't need the mind for anything really, apart from calculations and math. You know. Except initially, I suppose some people who wake up, have the experience, don't know what anything is, but generally in the mind states you know what it is in a relative sense. So, and what's going on, just like babies do in a way, because they're so right brain orientated that they just pick up on everything. So brain of the gut, our instincts that we tend to ignore, especially if we've been traumatized. I suppose depression could be like a surrender in a way as well, sort of mini collapse sometimes, or repair can go on, or a letting go, a bit like the seeing of emptiness is sort of, except it's very, very painful obviously, but sort of death, well, it's experiences of death of parts of the self, and you know, just stuck, no future, no past.
Is it the mind that stops people from having like an awakening experience? Like, is it a thought, like a thought blockage, or like I don't have thoughts, so I can't imagine it, but like is there a thought, if you're constantly thinking about the future or the past, is it stopping you from having that, like, oh actually everything's a lot bigger than what I'm thinking about?
I think that, I mean, you hear like some people say, I mean, I've read it, that if the mind is stopped for a certain amount of time, maybe even like a couple of days, that the ego couldn't survive that. And I do wonder, because in a sense I can't imagine, but maybe that's my own limitation, I can't imagine being no mind and not sort of seeing through it, because it is a kind of barrier, like it is a veil. Like after awakening it's not so much because it's seen, but it's seen through, and it's not quite the same, but it still is sweeter without it. It's still, I mean, you're just not accessing the stories, you really are where you are, like in a real sense. So maybe, I mean, the whole thing is, ego's based on language, isn't it? Like, you know, the whole sense of self, like, I mean, I might be wrong, I don't know, but I sense there is, because you've never had that at all.
I mean, I've had an ego for sure when I was like actively trying to be like everyone else and drinking and using drugs and that whole period. But when I got clean and realised I didn't need to do that, that's when the ego, I guess, left again.
But you would say an ego without thought, or?
Yeah, I guess. I was using other substances to get the ego. I think we all have an ego in a way, but it's just not, I can't think about it, I suppose, in a way that people can.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Well, the identity. Well, yeah, there's always an identity, isn't there? Except, I mean, so actually, when you think of someone who's actually narcissistic personality disorder, there is no ego at all. That's egoless. That's properly egoless. So all they can do is absorb the other and imitate the other. So there's no. That's an inner emptiness, which is very different from the emptiness of seeing this, because it's like being a ghost rather than being nothing. Yeah, but I because I don't know that. I mean, I know Kundalini experiences can incorporate no mind states, bliss states with no mind. But I feel to sort of see how that could continue for very long and sustain, and because for me, like before the sort of seeing of nothing and everything, there was a few days of no mind. And I have no idea whether it was self there or not. I don't know how I was experiencing it, but I just know, I don't know, it takes a while to put this stuff together because it was so kind of deep, and then, I don't know. It seems impossible to imagine the mind surviving that would. But it must be strange not knowing anything else as well, like what it's like to be trapped in mind, like, because it can be a real hell, that, like, and I suppose there's, I think in my case, I suppose more the thinking is much more neutral or just curious or less painful, whereas before it was all kind of much more fear-based stuff. But I suppose, like, even without the mind, I suppose the body can be in fear, obviously, and but I mean, it doesn't. I suppose, like, before awakening, if I'd heard someone like is in a no mind state or something, like, I would be thinking, wow, really. Because it's amazing what you can project onto too. Like, I mean, yes, it is, in a sense, it is really absolute that. It's like, so, I don't know, like, because you get up all the time, don't you? So but it's funny that we can deify that, like, or anything, anybody, really? Because I think it's like, it's a real leveler, isn't it? Like, seeing this is just, I don't know, you like who you like. And I don't know. Oh, well, maybe that's some of the patterns unwinding as well, because I know that I had a tendency to sort of project my own, anything I've got, I project on, good stuff onto the other, like, or whatever it is your tendency to do, well, that can sort of dissolve, can't it? And then I suppose the healthier you get, it's just like you do move towards further away from instrumental interactions to much more, I don't know, healthy, loving. What do you like? I say that. I hope you do. It feels kind of something like that, like, if you've never had that, I don't know. But I still say, like, I think after awakening, if your basic needs are threatened, you're probably going to be operating on a different level. Like, it's going to drag you down, and maybe, I mean, some people obviously wake up and then they just pack their bags and piss off. It's like, which is kind of amazing. I always find that amazing. Anyone who does that, like, just radically changes their life. There's something life affirming about that, wow, just right, enough, and boom, goes a different direction. But most of us can't, can we? We're stuck in tram lines, and we might shift a wee bit to the left, or a wee bit to the right, or think we're doing that, then we realise we're on the same fucking tram line. the intimacy's different. It's funny that, because it's almost like you do treat everyone the same, even if they're a stranger. And sometimes I think that can be misperceived. Thinking of that because of certain delivery man. Yeah, this is. I don't know. I suppose some people still use a persona or whatever, but I was never very good at persona. Well, maybe I was for a while, I suppose, but never really had a good workable persona. It was always a bit of a fail.